I was slicing carrots for Matthew's favorite stew when my son's name lit up my phone. "Mom, we moved to Austin last week," he said, voice flat, like he was reading a grocery list. "We forgot to tell you." The knife slipped. My fingers didn't bleed, but something inside me did. They thought they'd erased me. They had no idea I'd already sent the email that would burn their lies to the ground. Friends, before we dive into this story, I want to ask for a small favor. Please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Your support means everything to women like me who are finally finding their voice after years of silence. I was snipping dead leaves off my white camellias when Laura's name popped up on my phone, bright against the afternoon sun. I didn't drop the shears, didn't even flinch. My hands stayed steady, like they always do when everything inside me is falling apart. "Mom," she said, her voice flat, like she was reading lines off a cue card. "We're in Portland now. We moved 3 days ago. We just forgot to tell you." Forgot. Like I was the mail carrier or the neighbor who waters your plants while you're gone. Not the woman who held her through chickenpox fevers, who drove 2 hours in the rain when she was 16 and got her period in gym class, who sold her wedding ring to pay for Lily's private preschool because Laura cried and said she wanted the best for her daughter. I said, "It's okay, sweetheart." Same words I've said since she learned to talk. Same lie. My voice didn't crack. My breath didn't hitch. But something inside me, something I'd kept soft for decades, just broke clean in half. I finished pruning the last branch, set the shears down on the stone bench, and walked back into the house like nothing happened. Like my whole world hadn't just tilted off its axis. I passed the kitchen without looking. I didn't want to see the casserole still sitting on the stove, bubbling gently, made exactly how Lily likes it. Extra cheese, no onions, with garlic bread on the side. I'd spent the morning shopping, chopping, humming to myself, imagining her little hands grabbing the bread, her laugh when I pretend to steal a bite. Now it was just food, just another thing nobody wanted. My feet carried me straight to the bedroom, the one Henry and I shared for 30 years, the one I haven't touched since the hospice nurse closed his eyes for the last time. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers pressing into the quilt I stitched the year Lily was born. My chest felt empty, like someone had reached in and scooped out everything tender, the hope, the love, the stupid belief that if I gave enough, they'd stay. I didn't cry. Not then. Crying feels like begging, and I was. Done begging for scraps of attention from people who treat your heart like a doormat. I just sat there, staring at the framed photo on the nightstand. Henry, me, Laura at 8. All 3 of us squinting into the sun at the beach, arms around each other like we'd never let go. I'd give anything to go back to that day, to hug that little girl tighter, to whisper in her ear, "Don't forget who you come from." After 10 minutes of silence that pressed down like wet wool, I got up. My knees cracked, a small betrayal from a body that's been carrying grief longer than joy. I walked to the closet, pushed aside old sweaters and shoeboxes of receipts, and pulled out the laptop I'd bought with cash 3 months ago from a store downtown. Laura gave me my old one last year, saying, "You're not that young anymore, Mom. You need something simple." What she really meant was she wanted to monitor my browsing, make sure I didn't meddle. This one? No one knew about it. Not even Henry knew I could be this quiet, this careful. I sat on the bed again, opened it, and logged into an email account I'd created under my maiden name. My fingers trembled now, not from sadness, but from something sharper, hotter, anger, clarity. I'd kept quiet for years, swallowing every slight, every excuse, every time they canceled plans or took my money or made me feel like a burden in my own home. But this? Moving across the country without a word? Taking my granddaughter, the only light left in this house, like she was their possession and I was just background noise? That wasn't forgetfulness. That was cruelty wearing a polite mask. I opened a folder labeled Lily's Future and scrolled through what I'd gathered over the past months. Bank statements showing transfers from my account to Laura's under. Labels like roof repair, and emergency dental, when I knew damn well there was no roof leak and Lily's teeth were perfect. Screenshots of their social media posts from vacations I'd helped fund while I skipped my own doctor appointments to stretch my pension. A voice memo I'd secretly recorded. Last Christmas when Daniel said, "She's getting senile, easy to steer." I hadn't wanted to believe it then. Now I believed every word. I attached everything to a new email, typed in Mr. Langley's address, my lawyer since Henry's will, and started writing. Short, direct, no drama, just facts. We discussed the contingency plan last week. It's time to activate it. I'm attaching all documentation. Please initiate the freeze on the trust and proceed with the amendment as outlined. I didn't write, "My daughter betrayed me." I didn't say, "I'm heartbroken." I just said what needed to be done. Because that's the thing no one tells you. Love doesn't disappear when you're hurt. It just stops being the only thing that matters. Sometimes dignity has to come first. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Before the old me, the one who made excuses, who smoothed things over, who whispered, "It's not that bad," in the dark, could crawl back in. The laptop made a soft chime as the message went through. I closed it slowly, the click echoing in the quiet room. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't wonder if I was overreacting or being difficult. I just felt clear, like I'd been living underwater and finally broke the surface to take a real breath. I stood up, walked back to the kitchen, and turned off the stove. The casserole would spoil, but I didn't care. Let it rot. What was the point of saving dinner for people who didn't even tell you they were leaving? I opened the back door and stepped into the yard again, not to prune, but to just stand there. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the garden. Next door, Mr. Alvarez was watering his rose bushes. Down the street, kids were laughing on scooters. Life was moving on for everyone else. And for me, everything had just changed. I wasn't just a mother or a grandmother anymore. I was someone who'd stopped pretending. I went inside, got a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Henry proposed, where Laura did her homework, where Lily drew her first stick-figure family. I ran my hand over the wood, feeling every scratch, every gouge from a lifetime of meals and messes and memories. My phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't pick it up. I knew it was Laura. She'd realized her bank account was frozen, or Daniel had, and now they were panicking. Let them. For once, they'd have to sit with the consequences of their choices. I drank the water slowly, tasting nothing but resolve. Henry used to say I had a spine of steel wrapped in velvet. I'd forgotten that. Let them think I was soft. Let them think I was weak. They'd find out soon. Enough that velvet can tear, and what's underneath doesn't bend, it cuts. I stood up, rinsed the glass, and placed it gently in the dish rack. Tomorrow the legal notices would go out. Tomorrow they'd understand that forgetting to tell your mother you moved comes with a price. And I hadn't forgotten a single thing. Not the promises, not the sacrifices, not the lies. And from now on, I wouldn't forget my own worth either. I pulled into the bank parking lot just after 9 the next morning, my coffee still warm in the cup holder, my hands gripping the wheel a little too tight. The sun hadn't burned off the coastal fog yet, and everything looked soft around the edges, except my thoughts. I walked in like I did it every Tuesday, nodding at the security guard, smiling at the receptionist who always asked about Lily. But today, I wasn't here for small talk. I leaned over the counter and told the teller, "I need a complete transaction history for the joint account I opened for my granddaughter's education fund. Everything from day one." She blinked, then typed without asking why. 5 minutes later, she handed me a thick stack of papers stapled at the corner, the ink still faintly wet. "Here you go, Mrs. Carter," she said, like it was just another request. I thanked her, walked out without another word, and got back in my car. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, passenger seat empty, radio off, and started flipping through the pages. The first few months looked normal. Deposits from my savings, a few small withdrawals for Lily's music lessons, a school field trip. But then, around the time Daniel lost his job, the pattern shifted. Big chunks started vanishing. That's $200 labeled roof repair, $850 for emergency dental. I remembered asking Laura if everything was okay. She'd sighed and said the insurance didn't cover it, that they were stretched thin. My stomach twisted as I kept reading. Another $2,300 for school supplies. That one made me laugh out loud, a bitter, sharp sound that startled even me. Lily was in 2nd grade. Her backpack cost $35. I kept reading, my fingers smudging the ink as they trembled. The same amounts showed up on Daniel's credit card statements I'd accidentally seen months ago, statements I'd pretended not to notice when they left them open on the kitchen counter. Gym membership, $199 month. A weekend in Napa, $1,600 at a vineyard resort. A new Indian motorcycle, $18,000, paid in 3 installments, all pulled from that college fund. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to steady my breath. Laura had called me last winter, voice cracking, saying they were eating rice and beans, that Daniel was depressed, that they were one missed payment away from losing the guest house. And I'd believed her. Worse, I'd acted on it. I'd taken a second. Reverse mortgage on my home, cashed out my IRA penalty-free, even sold Henry's Mustang, the one he'd painstakingly restored in our garage over 20 years. I'd told myself it was for Lily, for her future. But now, staring at receipts for spa weekends and premium whiskey subscriptions, I saw the truth. I wasn't helping a struggling family. I was funding a lie. The car felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. I rolled down the window and gulped in the damp morning air, but it didn't help. My chest ached like I'd been running for miles, not from sadness, from betrayal, from the slow, sickening realization that every tear, every hug, every whispered, "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom," it was all part of a script. They saw a grieving widow with equity and treated me like a resource to drain. I drove home on autopilot, the bank papers crumpled in my lap. I didn't cry. Not then. Crying would mean I still cared enough to feel hurt. What I felt was colder, sharper. Humiliation, yes, but also something harder. Clarity. I parked in the driveway, walked past the guest house where they'd lived for 3 years, and went straight to my bedroom. I opened the closet, pulled out the laptop I'd hidden behind old shoeboxes, and sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed Henry and I shared for 30 years. My fingers moved on their own. I created a new folder on the desktop, named it Proof. Then I started dragging files into it, screenshots from old texts where Laura said they couldn't afford groceries, photos I'd taken of their car parked at luxury restaurants while they claimed to be cutting back. Even a note I'd scribbled after overhearing Daniel on the phone last summer. "Don't worry, her money's almost gone. We'll stage the Portland move by fall." I hadn't understood it then. Now I did. I opened the bank statements again and started typing notes beside each fraudulent entry. Roof repair, Napa Spa weekend, August 12th, emergency dental, gym membership renewal, October 3rd, school supplies, motorcycle down payment, November 28th. Each line I wrote felt like peeling off a bandage I hadn't realized was infected. For years, I'd told myself they were just going through a rough patch, that Laura was overwhelmed, that Daniel was trying his best, that my role was to support, not question. But support shouldn't mean surrender, and love shouldn't mean blindness. That afternoon, I made myself a sandwich and sat at the kitchen table, the bank papers spread out like evidence at a crime scene. I thought about calling Laura, confronting her, demanding answers. But I already knew what she'd say. "Mom, you're overreacting. It's not like that. We were going to pay you back." The same lines they'd used for years to keep me quiet. No, this time I wouldn't fall for it. I remembered Laura sobbing into my shoulder last Christmas, mascara smudged, saying, "We're drowning, Mom. Please don't let us sink." And I'd held her, stroked her hair like I did, when she was 5 and scared of thunder, and whispered, "I've got you." But she wasn't drowning. She was swimming in my savings while I treaded water in my own home. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the manipulation. The way they'd weaponized my love for Lily, my loyalty to family, my grief over Henry. All of it turned against me like a trap. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden. Henry's roses were blooming, red and full, just like he'd planted them. He'd always said, "Trust your gut, Evie. If something feels off, it probably is." I hadn't listened. I'd let fear of conflict, fear of being alone, fear of losing my daughter override my instincts. But that was over. I turned away from the window, went back to the laptop, and opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "Chronology of financial withdrawals, Lily's education fund, fraudulent use." Then I began listing every transaction, every lie, every date. My handwriting in the margins was steady, firm. For the first time in years, I wasn't apologizing in my head. I wasn't softening the truth. I was naming it. By evening, the sun had dipped below the hills, and the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I hadn't eaten dinner. I hadn't even changed out of my morning clothes. I sat at the kitchen table still, rereading my notes, cross-checking dates with old calendar entries, text logs, even Lily's school newsletters to confirm what supplies actually cost each term. The math was undeniable. Over 3 years, they'd taken $142,000 from Lily's fund. Not loans, not temporary help. Theft. Disguised as desperation, wrapped in guilt, delivered with hugs and tears. I thought about Lily. Her gap-toothed smile, the way she hugged my neck so tight it hurt. The bedtime stories we read. Every Sunday. Was any of that real? Or was I just part of the backdrop in their performance of a loving family? The thought made me sick. But beneath the sickness was something new. Resolve. I didn't want revenge. Not exactly. I wanted accountability. I wanted them to see that I wasn't the naive old woman they thought I was. That I saw them, all of them, clearly now. I closed the laptop, went to the sink, and filled a glass with water. My hands didn't shake. My breath was even. I walked back to the bedroom, placed the laptop back in its hiding spot, and stood for a moment in the center of the room. The house felt different, lighter somehow. Not because they were gone, because the illusion was. The story I'd told myself about being a supportive mother, a doting grandmother, a selfless matriarch. It was just that, a story. And stories can be rewritten. That night, after I'd showered and changed into clean pajamas, I sat at my desk and opened the proof folder one last time. I didn't add anything new. I just scrolled through it. Photos, notes, bank records, like I was reading someone else's case file. And maybe I was. Maybe the Evelyn who believed every excuse, who gave until she had nothing left, who swallowed every slight to keep the peace. That woman was gone. The one sitting here now didn't need to believe in their version of the truth. She had her own. I closed the laptop, turned off the lamp, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Outside, an owl called in the eucalyptus tree. The neighbor's dog barked once, then fell silent. The house settled around me, familiar and solid. I didn't feel lonely. I felt awake. For the first time in a long time, I hadn't spent the day wondering how to fix them. I'd spent it protecting what was mine. And that, right there, was the start of something real. I pulled Henry's old quilt up to my chin, closed my eyes, and slept without dreaming, because I wasn't waiting for them to come back. I was getting ready to fight. I slid into the booth at Marlowe's Cafe, the one right by the window overlooking the pier where Henry got down on one knee 40 years ago, ring box trembling in his hand, seagulls squawking like they were cheering him on. The place still smelled the same. Salt air, burnt coffee, buttery croissants. I'd worn my good linen shirt, the blue one Lily always said made my eyes pop, but I hadn't even brushed my hair. Eleanor was already there, stirring her tea with that slow, deliberate swirl she's had since college. She looked up, took one look at my face, and didn't ask how I was. She just reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Okay," she said. "What did they do?" I didn't cry. Not yet. I pulled out my laptop, the hidden one, and opened a folder labeled Lily. I flipped to the Instagram screenshots I'd saved. Laura and Daniel grinning on a trail in Oregon, arms around each. Other like newlyweds. Lily perched on the hood of a brand new Subaru Outback. Same forest green Henry always wanted, but never bought. Close-up of her feet in glossy brown boots that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "They moved 3 days ago," I said, my voice so low it barely left my lips. "Didn't tell me, just vanished. And now they're living like they won the lottery." Eleanor didn't flinch. She didn't say, "Oh, I'm sure it's not that bad." She just leaned in, her eyes sharp as flint. "Evelyn," she said, "they played you. They saw a grieving widow with equity and treated you like an ATM." Her words hit like a slap. Not because they were cruel, they were true. And that truth burned. I'd spent 3 years justifying every odd expense, every canceled dinner, every time Daniel said, "Your house is so cozy, Evelyn. You've got such a simple life." I thought I was helping my daughter. I thought I was giving my granddaughter stability. But looking at those photos, their relaxed smiles, the ease in their posture, the brand new car I didn't buy, I realized I'd been a background character in their story, not family. Eleanor pushed her tea aside and folded her arms. "You know, what kills me," she said, "that you sold Henry's Mustang. That car was your history, and they didn't even blink." I looked out the window. A couple walked by, holding hands, laughing. I remembered Henry walking me here after his first chemo session, weak but smiling, saying, "As long as I've got you, Evie, I've got everything." And now? My own daughter couldn't be bothered to say goodbye. Eleanor reached into her bag and slid a printed photo across the table. Lily's birthday last spring. Me holding her, flour on both our cheeks from baking cupcakes, her arms tight around my neck. "That's real," Eleanor said. "That's what they stole from you. Not just money, but her time with you. And you deserve better than silence." I nodded, but my throat was too tight to speak. She was right. I'd spent weeks swallowing my hurt, telling myself it was just how things are now. But this wasn't normal. This was calculated. We sat in silence for a while, the cafe noise fading into white noise, clinking cups, distant laughter, the low hum of the espresso machine. Eleanor didn't push. She just let me sit with the shame, the anger, the dawning horror that I'd let this happen. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. I traced the rim of my coffee cup, cold now. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me still wants to call Laura, beg to see Lily, pretend none of this happened. Eleanor shook her head. "That's the old you talking, the one who believed love meant never setting. Boundaries." She leaned forward. "You're not powerless, Evelyn. You built that guest house with your own hands. You refinanced your home. You paid for everything. That means you have proof. That means you have leverage." A spark flickered in my chest, small, but real. Not hope, exactly. Resolve. "I've been collecting things," I said quietly. "Bank statements, texts, receipts. I even have a voice memo from last Christmas where Daniel jokes about my endless widow's funds." Eleanor's eyes lit up. "Good. Now you use it. Not for revenge. For truth. For Lily." She was right. This wasn't just about me. Anymore. It was about making sure my granddaughter knew who really loved her, who showed up even when it cost something. We stayed another hour, Eleanor asking questions, helping me organize what I had. She didn't coddle me. She challenged me. "Did you read the trust agreement carefully? Do you have a lawyer who isn't connected to them? Have you secured your own email and devices?" Each question stripped away another layer of denial. I'd been so focused on being the easy grandmother, the one who never complained, that I'd forgotten I had rights. Eleanor reminded me I wasn't just a benefactor. I was the owner, the source. And no one gets to drain a well dry and call it kindness. When it was time to leave, she hugged me hard, her perfume, vanilla and lavender, familiar and grounding. "You've got this," she whispered, "and I've got you." Walking back to my car, the Santa Barbara, sun warm on my shoulders, I felt lighter than I had in months, not because the pain was gone, but because I wasn't carrying it alone, and I wasn't carrying their lies either. The grief was still there, the betrayal still raw, but now it had a direction. Now it had a name. I got in the car, started the engine, and didn't drive straight home. I pulled into the shaded lot of the public library instead, sat in the back row, laptop open, and double-checked every document I'd saved. Cross-referenced dates, verified account numbers, made sure nothing was missing. Eleanor's words echoed in my head. They treated you like an ATM, and ATMs don't bleed. They don't cry. They don't lie awake wondering what they did wrong. But I did, and I wouldn't anymore. I took a deep breath, opened my contacts, and scrolled to Mr. Langley's number, my lawyer since Henry's will. My thumb hovered over the call button. For a second, the old fear crept in. What if I'm overreacting? What if Laura never speaks to me again? But then I pictured Lily in those boots, smiling for strangers on social media, while I sat alone with a casserole no one wanted. No, this wasn't overreaction. This was self-preservation. I pressed call. It rang twice. "Mr. Langley," I said, when he answered, my voice steady, clear. "It's Evelyn Carter. It's time." I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. He knew what I meant. He'd been waiting for this call as long as I'd been avoiding it. On the drive home, the ocean glittered to my left, waves crashing against the rocks like a heartbeat. I didn't speed. I didn't cry. I just drove, hands loose on the wheel, windows down, salt air filling the car. For the first time in years, I didn't rehearse what I'd say to Laura to make her stay. I didn't wonder how I could fix this. I just let it be broken. And in that brokenness, I found something solid. Myself. Eleanor was right. They played me. But the game was over. From now on, I wouldn't be the quiet widow who gives until there's nothing left. I'd be the woman who protects what's hers, even if it means standing alone. I turned. Onto my street, past the neighbors' trimmed hedges and blooming jacarandas, and pulled into my driveway. The house was quiet, the guest house empty, but I didn't feel loss. I felt space, room to breathe, room to act. I turned off the engine, sat for a moment, and whispered to Henry wherever he was. I'm done being kind to people who treat kindness like weakness. Then I got out, walked inside, and locked the door behind me, not to keep them out, but to keep me in, safe, awake, ready. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop propped on a stack of cookbooks, the same ones Lily used to flip through when she helped me bake banana bread, and Mr. Langley's email open on the screen. The subject line read, "Amended Trust, Lily Whitmore Education Fund, effective immediately." I reread the body for the third time, my fingers resting lightly on the keyboard, not out of hesitation, but to steady myself. Attached was the revised trust document, now sealed with digital signatures and notarized timestamps. It stated plainly, all disbursements from the fund were suspended pending investigation. Any assets transferred from my accounts to Laura or Daniel in the past 3 years were under legal review, and access to the trust would remain restricted until a court-determined rightful use. My pulse thudded in my temples, but my breath was even. I didn't pray. I didn't cry. I just clicked send before the old me, the one who smoothed things over, who swallowed every slight to keep the peace, could creep back in and undo it all. The email whooshed away into the ether, and with it, years of silence I never meant to keep. I closed the laptop slowly, the soft click echoing in the quiet kitchen. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler hissed in steady rhythm, and the scent of jasmine drifted through the open window. I stood up and walked to the sink, ran the tap, filled the kettle just like I'd done 1,000 mornings before. But this time, my hands didn't tremble. This time, I wasn't making tea to calm my nerves or distract myself from worry. This time, the ritual felt like armor. I set the kettle on the stove, struck the match for the gas burner, and watched the blue flame catch. While I waited for it to boil, I tidied the counter, wiped crumbs, stacked mail, placed Lily's stray hair tie back in the junk drawer where she always left it. Every small act felt deliberate, like I was reclaiming my space, one motion at a time. I thought about Henry sitting at this same table, signing his last tax return before he got too weak, telling me, "You're stronger than you." Think, Evie, don't let kindness become a cage. I hadn't understood then. I did now. The kettle whistled, sharp and insistent, pulling me back. I poured the water over the chamomile, watched the steam rise like a ghost of all the things I'd let go unsaid. 2 hours later, as I sat on the back porch, with my cooling tea, my phone buzzed on the arm of the chair. I didn't jump, I didn't rush. I let it ring once, twice, before glancing at the screen. Laura. My thumb hovered for half a second. Old habits die hard. But I didn't answer. A moment later, a text popped up. "Mom, what is this?" "Daniel's bank. Account is locked." Then another. "They're saying it's tied to your trust. Call me now." I stared at the words, the urgency in all caps, the demand wrapped in panic. No, "Are you okay?" No, "What's going on?" Just blame, just expectation, just the same script they'd used for years. When the money flows, I'm grandma. When it stops, I'm the problem. I turned off the screen and set the phone face down on the wicker table. The sunset was starting to bleed gold across the sky, painting the palm fronds in long shadows. I took a slow sip of tea. It was bitter now, lukewarm, but I didn't care. I just sat there, watching the light change, feeling something I hadn't felt since Henry died. Clarity. Not vindictiveness, not revenge, just the quiet certainty that I wasn't wrong for wanting to protect what I'd worked for, what I'd saved for Lily. I remembered Laura at 5, coming into my room, after a nightmare, climbing into bed between Henry and me, whispering, "You're my safe place, Mommy." Somewhere along the way, I became her ATM instead. And Daniel? He wasn't family. He was a guest who overstayed, then started rearranging the furniture. I'd let it happen because I was afraid. Afraid of losing Lily. Afraid of being alone. Afraid that saying no would mean I wasn't loving enough. But love shouldn't cost your dignity. Love shouldn't mean ignoring your gut when it screams that something's off. I thought about the luxury gym memberships, the Napa trips, the motorcycle, all paid for. Paid. With Lily's future, all justified with tears and emergencies. And now that the tap was turned off, they were scrambling. Good. Let them feel what it's like to be on the other side of the ledger. Let them understand that kindness has limits, and mine had just been redrawn in ink that wouldn't. Smudge. I stood up, carried my empty mug inside, and rinsed it under the tap. The house was quiet. No laughter from the guest house, no Lily's chatter, no Daniel's loud phone calls about investment opportunities. Just silence. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space. Room to breathe. Room to think. Room to be Evelyn, not just mom or grandma or the widow with equity. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. Kids were riding bikes. Mrs. Chen was walking her terrier. Life was moving on, ordinary and steady. And I was part of it. Again, not as a supporting character in someone else's story, but as the author of my own. I didn't hate Laura. I didn't even hate Daniel. Not really. But I refused to be used anymore. And that refusal didn't make me cruel. It made me awake. I went back to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled. Out leftovers, just enough for one. I heated them in a bowl, ate standing at the counter, watching the last streaks of orange fade from the sky. My phone buzzed again. Then again. I didn't check it. I knew what it would say. Accusations, pleas, maybe even threats. Let them come. I'd already crossed. The line I'd been too scared to step over for years. And on the other side, there wasn't ruin. There was relief. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for protecting what was mine. Not the money, not the house, but my truth, my boundaries, my peace. I scraped my plate, loaded the dishwasher, and turned off the kitchen light. As I walked down the hall to my bedroom, I realized my shoulders weren't hunched. My jaw wasn't clenched. I wasn't rehearsing apologies in my head. I was just me. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. I was kneeling on the tile floor of the guest house, going through a cardboard box of old receipts I'd saved for tax season, when my fingers brushed against something stiff tucked behind a stack of utility bills. It was a crumpled manila envelope, yellowed at the edges, with Daniel's messy scrawl on. The front, "Notes, do not throw." My stomach dropped before I even opened it. I'd cleaned this place twice since they left, but somehow this had stayed hidden, wedged behind the baseboard near the closet, like he'd tucked it away in a hurry. I sat back on my heels, the afternoon light slicing through the dusty window, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a letter from a firm called Horizon Risk Assessments, dated 6 months ago. The subject line read, "Preliminary Findings, Evelyn Carter, DOB 03-12-1961. Below it, in cold professional language, it detailed my observed behaviors: socially isolated, emotionally dependent on daughter, exhibits signs of financial naivety, recently widowed, likely vulnerable to influence. The final line twisted my gut. Recommend continued engagement. Target appears primed for asset transfer with minimal resistance. I dropped the paper like it had burned me. My hands shook, not with fear, but with fury so sharp it made my teeth ache. They hadn't just taken advantage of me, they'd studied me. They'd mapped my grief like a treasure chest and sent a hired spy to confirm I'd hand over the keys without a fight. I sat there on the floor for a long time, the envelope limp in my lap, staring at the guest house wall where Lily's height chart still marked her growth in pencil. Every birthday, I'd measured her, laughing as she stood tall on tiptoes. "Look how big you're getting, bug," I'd say. And all the while, her father was paying someone to report back on how fragile her grandmother was, how easily she could be shaped, bent, emptied. I remembered Daniel's sudden interest last fall, asking if I'd updated my will, commenting on how tired I looked, even suggesting I simplify my finances by letting him help manage things. I'd chalked it up to concern. Stupid, sentimental me. I'd believed he cared, but this letter proved it. Every kind word, every "you deserve to relax, Evelyn," every "let us take that off your plate." It was all part of a script. They weren't just living in my guest house. They were running a con, and I'd been the perfect mark, grieving, generous, and blind with love for my granddaughter. I stood up slowly, my knees cracking, and walked to the sink. I ran cold water over my wrists, watching the droplets fall like tears I refused to shed. No, this wasn't the time for crying. This was the time for consequences. I took a deep breath, folded the letter carefully, and slipped it into the back pocket of my jeans. Then I went back to the main house with purpose in my step and ice in my veins. I didn't wait. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Daniel once toasted family over wine I'd bought, opened my laptop, and scanned the letter into a PDF. I highlighted key phrases: financial vulnerability, minimal resistance, asset transfer. Each word felt like a slap, but also like proof. Solid, undeniable proof. I thought about calling Laura first, confronting her, demanding to know if she knew. But I stopped myself. Of course she knew. She'd been there for every sob I swallowed, every check I wrote, every time I pretended not to notice their new gadgets, their weekend getaways, their careless spending. She'd held my hand while her husband hired a spy to evaluate my mental state like I was a malfunctioning appliance. That betrayal cut deeper than Daniel's. It was intimate, deliberate, cruel. But I didn't let the pain cloud my next move. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Langley. He answered on the second ring. "Evelyn," he said, his voice alert. He knew I didn't call unless it mattered. "I just found something," I said, my voice steady, low, controlled. "Daniel hired a private investigator 6 months ago to assess my mental stability and financial vulnerability. The report recommends they continue engagement because I'm primed for asset transfer." There was a pause, then, "Send it to me now. I'll amend the filing immediately." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Add emotional manipulation and elder exploitation to the claims," I said. I want it all on record. After I hung up, I walked out to the backyard and stood. Under the old oak tree Henry planted the year we moved in. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows, and the air smelled like rosemary and dry earth. I pressed my palm against the rough bark, grounding myself. For months, I'd told myself they were just selfish, just careless, just caught up in their own lives. But this was premeditated, calculated. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd weaponized my love, my loneliness, my grief. They'd turned my kindness into a weakness to exploit. And the worst part? It had almost worked. I could have gone to my grave thinking I'd failed as a mother, that my daughter simply outgrew me. But now I knew the truth. I hadn't failed. I'd been targeted, and that changed everything. I wasn't a fool. I was a victim, and victims have rights. I walked back inside, poured myself a glass of water, and sat on the porch swing. My hands were calm now. My mind was clear. I wasn't angry in a wild, messy way. I was focused. Every document, every text, every lie, they were building a wall around me, brick by brick. But walls can be torn down. And I had the tools. That evening I made a simple dinner, soup and toast, and ate it at the kitchen counter, not the dining table. There was no need for ceremony anymore. No need to pretend this was still a family home waiting for their return. It was mine. Just mine. I opened the proof folder on my laptop and added the scanned letter, labeling it clearly. P.I. Report, Daniel Reeves, June 2024. Then we wrote a short note summarizing the context. Found hidden in guest house after their departure. Confirms premeditated financial exploitation. I didn't embellish. I didn't vent. I just documented. Because in court, in legal filings, in the eyes of the law, facts speak louder than tears. I thought about Henry then. How he'd always said, "Truth doesn't need decoration, Evie. It just needs to be told straight." He'd be proud of me now, not for being strong but for being honest, for refusing to let shame silence me. I closed the laptop and went to bed early, my body heavy with exhaustion, but my spirit strangely light. For the first time since they left, I didn't feel confused or guilty. I felt certain. They'd thought I was fragile, but fragility breaks. What I was becoming, that didn't break. It hardened. I fell asleep quickly, wrapped in Henry's old flannel blanket, and dreamed he was sitting beside me on our old bench by the garden. He took my hand in his, warm, calloused, familiar, and said, "You're not weak, Evie. You never were." In the dream, I didn't argue. I didn't say, "But I let them walk all over me." I just nodded, because in that moment I believed him. I'd spent years defining strength as silence, as sacrifice, as never making a fuss. But real strength was this: seeing the truth, naming it, and refusing to look away. When I woke up just before dawn, the house was quiet, the sky pale gray, and for the first time in months, I didn't reach for my phone to check if Laura had called. I got up, made coffee, and stood at the window watching the light spread across the yard. My hands didn't tremble. My heart didn't ache. I felt ready, not for revenge, for justice. And justice starts with truth. And I had just found the piece that tied it all together. 3 days, 72 hours of silence, so complete it felt like the world had gone mute. No texts lighting up my phone, no missed calls, not even a robotic, "We're thinking of you" email from Daniel's fake family wellness newsletter he used to send when they needed something. I didn't call them all. I didn't check their social media. I watered my camellias, paid my bills, made my bed with hospital corners like Henry taught me. But every time the mail truck rumbled down the street, my stomach clenched. On the 4th morning, there it was. Tucked between a pharmacy coupon and the electric bill, thick cream envelope with my name written in Laura's looping cursive, the same handwriting she used for my birthday cards since she was 10. My fingers didn't shake as I opened it, but my breath caught. Inside, on heavy linen paper that probably cost more than my grocery run, she'd written a letter. Not a note, a letter. Like this deserved ceremony. She called my legal action madness, said I was sabotaging Lily's stability and punishing them for wanting a better life. She wrote that I'd changed, that I was bitter and controlling, and, this one cut deepest, not the mom I remember. I read it once, standing in the kitchen, the paper crisp in my hands. Then I sat at the table and read it again, slower, letting each accusation sink in like a stone in still water. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't mention the lies, the stolen money, the PI report. Just blame, just guilt, just a daughter twisting the knife to protect the man who'd turned her against me. I wanted to cry, not the quiet tears I shed when Henry died, but the ugly, gasping kind that leaves you hollow. But I didn't, because beneath the hurt was something colder, clearer, like ice forming over a cracked surface. She wasn't defending herself. She was defending him. Daniel, who'd hired someone to call me mentally unstable. Daniel, who'd spent Lily's college fund on spa weekends. And Laura, my bright-eyed girl who once whispered secrets into my neck at bedtime, was choosing his version of the truth over mine. Over reality. Over Lily's actual future. The worst part wasn't the words bitter or controlling. It was not the mom I remember. As if the woman who raised her, who held her through fevers and heartbreaks and college rejections, was someone to be discarded now that she no longer served their narrative. I thought about the letter I'd written to Lily last week, the one with the pressed camellia petal, still sitting in an envelope on my desk. Would Laura even give it to her? Or would it end up in the trash like my love? My hands stayed steady as I folded the letter along its original. Creases, smooth and precise. No crumpling, no drama, just deliberate action. This wasn't a personal plea. It was a tactic, a last-ditch effort to make me back down by weaponizing my love for Lily. And I wouldn't fall for it. Not again. I walked to my bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the laptop. The evidence folder was already full. Bank statements, screenshots, the PI report. But it needed this too. The raw, unfiltered proof that my own daughter would rather believe a con man than her mother. I scanned the letter quickly, saved it as Laura letter 222-40612, and dragged it into the folder. Then I printed a hard copy, just in case. Paper doesn't crash. Paper doesn't get hacked. It just sits there, undeniable. As I slipped the original into the folder with the others, I thought about all the times I'd softened my truth to spare Laura's feelings, letting Daniel's rude comments slide, pretending not to notice when they skipped my birthday, swallowing my pride when they took my money. I told myself it was love, but love shouldn't cost your self-respect. And this letter was the final confirmation. They didn't want a mother. They wanted a silent benefactor with deep pockets and no opinions. The realization didn't break me. It freed me, because now I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice. Laura had looked at the man who saw me as prey and said, "Yes, I'll stand with you." And I looked at the woman in the mirror, wrinkled, tired, but still, standing, and said, "No more." I went to the kitchen and made tea. The same chamomile blend Henry and I drank every evening. The ritual felt different now, less like comfort, more like armor. As the kettle boiled, I replayed Laura's words in my head. Not the mom I remember. Maybe she was right. The mom she remembered didn't know how to say no. The mom she remembered apologized for existing. The mom she remembered believed that silence was a form of love. But that woman was gone. What stood in her place was someone who'd finally understood. You can't protect your child by destroying yourself. You can't give your granddaughter a future by funding a lie, and you sure as hell can't teach Lily about integrity while letting her parents treat you like a doormat. The whistle of the kettle pulled me back. I poured the water, watched the steam rise, and didn't flinch when my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't check it. I knew it wasn't Laura calling to talk. It was probably another passive-aggressive text or Daniel demanding I drop this nonsense. But I was done reacting, done begging, done pretending their version of reality was valid. I stirred honey into my tea, the spoon clinking. softly against the mug, and felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not happiness, not forgiveness, but peace in knowing I'd finally drawn a line, and I wasn't on the wrong side of it. That afternoon, I took Lily's letter from my desk and sealed it. I wrote Laura's new address on the front, added a sticky note, "For Lily, do not read." Then I walked to the mailbox at the end of my driveway and dropped it in. Let her decide what to do with it. My job wasn't to force connection. It was to offer it, clearly, honestly, without strings. The rest was up to Lily, and as I turned back toward the house, I realized I didn't feel desperate. I didn't feel like I was losing her, because real bonds don't snap under truth. They bend, they stretch, and if they're strong enough, they hold. But if they don't, then they weren't real to begin with. I thought about the camellias in my garden, how they shed, their old blooms so new ones can grow. Maybe that's what this was, a painful pruning, a necessary loss. Laura might never see it, but I did. By choosing Daniel over me, she wasn't just rejecting her mother. She was rejecting the values I taught her: honesty, loyalty, courage. And that wasn't my failure. That was hers. The sun was warm on my shoulders as I walked back inside. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt mine. Every room, every photo, every memory, no longer waiting for their return, but standing firm in its own right. I sat on the porch swing and sipped my tea, watching a hummingbird dart between the flowers. Life went on, and so would I. That night, after dinner, I opened the evidence folder one last time. I scrolled through everything: the receipts, the recordings, the bank logs, now Laura's letter at the top. Each file was a brick in the wall I'd built, not to shut them out, but to protect what was left of me. I didn't hate Laura. I missed her. I grieved the relationship we'd lost. But I wouldn't sacrifice my dignity to get it back. Because dignity isn't something you give away and then ask for later. It's something you defend, even when it costs you everything you thought you needed. I closed the laptop, turned off the lamp, and stood in the center of my bedroom. The moonlight spilled through the curtains, painting silver stripes across Henry's side of the bed. "I'm sorry it came to this," I whispered, not sure if I was talking to him, to Laura, or to myself. But I'm not sorry I protected us. I walked to the window and looked out at the street, quiet, familiar, safe. My daughter had chosen a man who saw me as prey. And I chose myself. And for the first time in a long time, that choice didn't feel selfish. It felt like survival. It felt like strength. It felt like the beginning of something real. I wore Henry's watch to the courthouse, the one he wore on our wedding day. Its silver band worn smooth from 60 years of his skin. I fastened it myself that morning, my fingers steady, even though my stomach had been knotted since 4 a.m. The courthouse loomed downtown, all stone steps and echoing. Halls, and I walked up them slowly, gripping my folder like a shield. Inside, the preliminary hearing room was smaller than I expected. Cold, fluorescent lights bouncing off beige walls. I spotted them before they saw me. Laura and Daniel, in matching navy blazers, sitting stiffly on the far side of the aisle, heads bent together like they were in church, not court. Laura wouldn't meet my eyes. Daniel stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Their lawyer, a slick-looking man with 2 white teeth, stood as the judge entered, already flipping through papers like he owned the room. I sat alone, back, straight against the wooden bench, Henry's watch ticking softly against my wrist, the only sound that reminded me I was still breathing. Their lawyer went first, of course. He spoke fast, smooth, like he was selling something. "Your Honor," he said, gesturing toward me with a condescending half-smile. "Mrs. Carter is a grieving widow, understandably vulnerable, but she voluntarily transferred these funds over several years. There was no coercion, no deception. She gifted the money out of love for her daughter and grandson." He paused, then added, quieter but loud enough for me to hear, "She's now emotionally unstable, regretting generosity she once willingly gave." My cheeks burned, but I didn't flinch. I just kept my hands folded in my lap, nails digging into my palms. Laura finally glanced over, her eyes wide, not with guilt, but with something worse, pity, like I was the crazy one, like I was the problem. And maybe, in their version of the story, I was. But then Mr. Langley stood, my lawyer, calm, gray-haired, wearing the same rumpled suit he's had since Henry's funeral, cleared his throat and said, "Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to play a short recording." He didn't look at them. He just plugged his phone into the courtroom speaker, and Daniel's voice filled the room, bright and smug. "Her money's almost gone. Let's stage a job offer out of state." The room went dead silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. Laura gasped. Daniel shot up like he'd been electrocuted. "That's edited," he shouted, but the judge's hand came down hard on the bench. "Sit down." His voice was ice. Mr. Langley didn't smile. He just said, "This was recorded in Mrs. Carter's home last Christmas Eve during a private family dinner. No editing. No fabrication. Just the truth." He let that hang in the air. The judge, older, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who'd seen every lie under the sun, leaned forward, elbows on the desk, and stared right at Daniel. "You plan to leave without telling her?" It wasn't a question. Daniel opened his mouth, then shut it. Laura looked like she wanted to disappear. I didn't gloat. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every time I told myself their lies were just stress, just bad luck, just life. But this was proof. Not just that they took my money, but that they never saw me as family. Just a source, a temporary resource to drain before moving on. The judge turned to Mr. Langley. "Play it again." And he did. Daniel's voice, cheerful and cruel. "Her money's almost gone." This time, Laura covered her face with her hands. The judge didn't waste time after that. He asked a few sharp questions. How much was taken, under what pretenses, whether I'd signed anything under duress. Mr. Langley handed over printed bank statements, the letter from the private investigator, even screenshots of their Instagram posts showing luxury. Vacations paid for with Lily's college fund. "This isn't generosity," Mr. Langley said quietly. "This is exploitation dressed as family loyalty." The judge nodded slowly, then looked directly at me for the first time. "Mrs. Carter, did you ever intend for this money to be used for personal expenses, unrelated to your granddaughter's future?" "No, Your Honor," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Every dollar was meant for Lily, not for gym memberships, not for motorcycles, not for lies. He held my gaze a second longer, then turned to the defense. "Your claims of voluntary gifting don't hold up against documented deception and premeditated withdrawal strategies." Daniel tried to argue, but the judge cut him off. "The freeze on the trust stands. All assets transferred from Mrs. Carter in the last 3 years are under legal review. You will not access a single cent until this court determines rightful use." Laura whispered something to Daniel, her voice trembling. He shook his head like a trapped animal. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. When the gavel came down, it wasn't loud, just a sharp tap, but it echoed like thunder in my chest. The hearing was over. Mr. Langley touched my arm gently. "You did it, Evelyn." I nodded, but I couldn't speak yet. My legs felt like wet paper as I stood, but I made myself walk without leaning on anything. Laura finally looked at me then, her eyes red, mouth open like she wanted to say something. Apologize, maybe, or blame me some more. I didn't give her the chance. I didn't look left. I didn't look right. I walked straight down the center aisle, past their table, past their matching blazers and their rehearsed innocence, and out the heavy courtroom doors. The courthouse hallway was suddenly too bright, too loud with footsteps and murmured conversations. I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, Henry's watch ticking against my pulse. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt clean, like I'd been carrying their lies in my lungs for years, and finally, I'd coughed them out. My legs were weak from holding back tears I wouldn't let fall, but my spine was straight. Not because I'd won, but because I'd told the truth, and the truth had stood on its own 2 feet. Outside, the California sun hit my face like a blessing. I took a deep breath, real air, not that stale courtroom stuff, and let it fill me. A pigeon fluttered off a bench. A couple argued over a parking spot. Normal life, moving on. I walked to my car slowly, not rushing, not hiding. I didn't check my phone. I knew they'd be calling, texting, maybe even chasing me down the block. But not today. Today, I'd face them in a room where lies couldn't hide behind love or family. Today, I'd protected Lily's future without begging or explaining. I got in the car, started the engine, and didn't look in the rearview mirror. No glances back at the courthouse, no second-guessing, no softening of the heart, because softness had cost me everything once. Now I was learning that steel wrapped in velvet could still hold a child's hand, and still cut through deceit with one clean stroke. I drove home with the windows down, Henry's watch gleaming on my wrist, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was disappearing. I felt like I was finally showing up. A week after the hearing, I was deadheading the roses when I heard the car pull up. Too slow, too hesitant to be a delivery. I didn't turn around right away. I kept snipping, even though my fingers had gone stiff. Then I saw her shadow stretch across the path. Laura, alone. Her hair was messy, her jacket wrinkled, and she was clutching Lily's old stuffed rabbit, the one with one ear chewed off and eyes mismatched from too many washes. She stood on the bottom step like she wasn't sure she was allowed to come closer. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking before she even got the word out. I turned. Then, her eyes were red, swollen, mascara streaked down her cheeks like rain on a dirty window. "He's leaving me," she whispered, barely audible. "Said I'm compromised now that you've exposed us. Said I'm a liability." And just like that, she crumpled onto the porch, knees hitting the wood with a thud, and started sobbing. Great, heaving cries that sounded like they'd been bottled up for years. I didn't move. I didn't go to her. I just stood there, shears in hand, watching my daughter break open on my front step like a rotten fruit. I wanted to hug her. God, part of me ached to. The part that remembered rocking her through fevers, braiding her hair before school, holding her when her first boyfriend broke her heart. But another part, the part that had read the private investigator's report, that had sat through court while Daniel lied through his teeth, knew that comfort now would be cheap. It would erase nothing. So I stayed where I was, just inside the garden gate, and let her cry. She cried until her shoulders shook and her breath came in gasps. She pressed Lily's rabbit to her chest like it was the only thing anchoring her. I didn't say, "It's okay." I didn't say, "He'll come back." I waited until her sobs slowed to hiccups, until she finally looked up at me, raw and ashamed. "You knew who he was," I said, my voice low but steady. "You've known for a long time, and you chose him over me." She didn't argue. She didn't make excuses. She just nodded, eyes dropping to the porch slats, tears still slipping down. That nod was the first honest thing she'd given me in years. No deflection, no blame shifting, just truth, ugly and quiet. And in that moment, I saw not the woman who'd betrayed me, but the girl who'd been groomed to trust the wrong people. The girl who thought love meant silence, loyalty meant surrender. I finally stepped forward, not to embrace her, but to open the screen door. "Come inside," I said. She hesitated, then stood slowly, brushing dust off her jeans like she was trying to clean more than just dirt. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Daniel once toasted family while stealing from my bank account. I made tea, not because I wanted to soothe her, but because I needed something to do with my hands. "What are you going to do?" I asked, as I set the mug in front of her. She wrapped her fingers around it like it might keep her from floating away. "I don't know," she whispered. "He took the car, changed the passwords on all the accounts, said if I contact you again, he'll go nuclear with the media. Tell them you're harassing us, trying to steal Lily." I almost laughed. Of course he would. Threats were his last resort when charm failed. "He's scared," I said, because for the first time, someone saw through him. and that someone was you." She flinched. "I didn't see it," she said. "Not really, I just wanted to believe we were okay, that we were building something." "You were building on sand," I said gently. "And now it's washed away." She didn't argue. She just stared into her tea, tears falling silently into the cup. For the first time, she wasn't defending him. She was grieving the lie she'd lived. After a while, she asked about Lily. "Is there any way I could see her? Even just a letter?" I studied her face. The desperation was real, but so was the fear. Not of me, of him. And that gave me pause. This wasn't just about punishment anymore. It was about Lily, my granddaughter, who'd been used as a pawn, a prop in their performance of a happy family. "You can write to her," I said. "I'll make sure. She gets it. But no gifts, no promises, just honesty." She nodded, relief and guilt twisting together in her expression. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't say, "You're welcome." Not yet. Trust wasn't a switch you flipped back on. But maybe, just maybe, it was a door you could crack open, one honest word at a time. When she stood to leave, she handed me the stuffed rabbit. "She'll need this," she said. "She sleeps with it every night." I took it. The fabric was soft from years of love, and it still smelled faintly like Lily's shampoo. "I'll give it to her," I said. And for the first time, I believed I would. That night, after she drove away with her taillights shrinking down the street, I went to my desk and opened the trust file on my laptop. I reread the current terms, frozen assets, legal oversight, the clause about misuse. Then I started typing a new section. Release of Lily. Whitmore Education Fund shall be contingent upon the following. 1. Laura Whitmore must complete a certified financial counseling program focused on debt management and boundary setting. 2. Laura Whitmore must provide documented evidence of severed financial and residential ties with Daniel Reeves. 3. Compliance will be verified by independent third party appointed by this trust. I didn't make it about revenge. I made it about safety, about giving Laura a real chance on solid ground, not quicksand. Because justice isn't just stopping the harm. It's building a fence so it can't happen again. I saved the document, then printed 2 copies, one for Mr. Langley, one for my file. As I slipped the new pages into the folder, I thought about Lily. She deserved more than a fund. She deserved a mother who knew her own worth. And maybe, just maybe, this clause could help Laura find hers. I went to bed late, Lily's rabbit resting on my nightstand like a silent promise. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel soft. I felt clear. For years I'd confused love with sacrifice, loyalty with silence. But tonight I understood. Real love sets boundaries. Real loyalty demands truth. And real protection sometimes looks like a locked door with a key only earned through change. I turned off the lamp, listened to the quiet house settle around me, and for the first time since they left, I didn't feel like I was waiting for them to come back. I was waiting for Lily, not the version they'd used as leverage, but the real girl underneath, the one who drew me pictures and hugged my neck like I was her whole world. And if Laura wanted back in that circle, she'd have to earn it, not with tears, not with blame, but with action. Justice wasn't just punishment. It was a lifeline. For Lily, for Laura, and maybe, in the end, for me too. 3 months to the day after they disappeared, I was sorting laundry in the quiet of my bedroom when the mail came. Nothing special, just a utility bill and a supermarket flyer. But tucked behind them was a small, crooked envelope with a Portland postmark and no return address. My hands slowed. Didn't recognize the handwriting, but something in my chest tightened like a fist. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same one Henry and I shared for 30 years, and carefully tore it open. Inside wasn't a letter from Laura or some legal notice from Daniel. It was a piece of thick drawing paper, folded twice, covered in bright crayon. A house with a red roof, a yellow door, and big purple flowers spilling from window boxes. At the top, in uneven block letters, Grandma's house with flowers. I turned it over. On the back, in wobbly, determined script, I miss you. Daddy is mean now. That was all. No date, No signature, just those 6 words, written with the kind of honesty only a child can manage. I didn't make a sound at first. I just stared, my vision blurring, my breath stuck somewhere between my ribs. Then the tears came. Hot, sudden, silent at first. Then deep sobs that shook my whole body until my ribs ached and my throat burned. I cried for Lily, alone in a new city, with a man who saw people as tools. I cried for the little girl who still remembered my garden, my hugs, my voice. And I cried for myself, for all the nights I'd wondered if she even thought of me. I didn't call Laura. Not then, not ever with urgency in my voice again, because I knew now any contact I initiated would be twisted, monitored, maybe even used against me. Laura had made her choice when she sided with Daniel, when she let him walk all over me while pretending it was just how things are. But Lily? Lily didn't choose any of this. She was caught in the middle, just like I'd been caught in their web of lies and manipulation. I sat with the drawing in my lap for a long time, smoothing the creases, tracing the waxy lines with my thumb. That purple flower, she'd seen me plant those. Camellias last spring. She remembered. That tiny detail undid me all over again. I got up, walked to the garden, and picked 2 fresh white camellias. I laid them between the pages of an old dictionary, the one Henry used to read poetry from, and pressed them flat under a stack of cookbooks. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I just moved with purpose, like I was preparing a sacred offering. Because in a way, I was. This wasn't just a letter. It was a lifeline. A quiet, steady signal through the static. I'm still here. I see you. You're not alone. The next morning, I bought real stationery, thick, cream-colored paper with a soft texture, and sat at the kitchen table with my best pen. No emails, no texts, a real letter. I wrote slowly, carefully, like I was carving each word into stone. Dear Lily, I got your drawing. Your flowers made me smile. My garden is still blooming, and I water it every morning, thinking of you. I press camellia petals in books so I'll always have a piece of spring. I'm sending you 2. Keep one in your pocket. Keep one under your pillow. I'm here, always. Love, Grandma. That was it. No questions about Daniel. No guilt about Laura. Just love. Just presence. Just a promise that didn't demand anything in return. I sealed the envelope, tucked in the dried petals, and wrote Lily's name in big, clear letters on the front. Then I added a small, sticky note on the outside in firm handwriting. Give this to Lily. Don't read it. I didn't say please. I didn't soften. Didn't it. I meant it as a boundary, not a request, because this letter wasn't for Laura. It wasn't even really for me. It was for Lily, to remind her that somewhere, someone loved her without conditions, without performance, without strings. I drove to the post office myself, even though the mailbox was right outside my house. I wanted to watch it drop into the slot, to feel the weight leave my hands. The clerk smiled as she took it. Sending love? She asked. I just nodded. Long way to Portland, she said, stamping it with care. Hope it gets there fast. I hoped so too, but not for the reason, she thought. I didn't need Lily to reply. I didn't need her to fix anything. I just needed her to know, deep in her bones, that she had a safe place in this world, even if she couldn't get to it yet. On the drive home, the sun was high and the ocean glittered to the west. I rolled down the window and let the salt air fill the car. My chest still felt tender from crying, but beneath the ache was something new, a quiet pulse of hope. Not the frantic, desperate kind that begs for reconciliation or forgiveness. Not the kind that hopes Laura will come crawling back with remorse. This was different. This was hope for connection. Pure, simple, unbroken by adult lies. Hope that Lily would keep that letter under her pillow. That she'd trace the words with her fingers when things got hard. That she'd remember there's a house with purple flowers and a grandma who never stopped loving her. That night, I left the lights off and sat on the porch swing, listening to the crickets and the distant hum of traffic. I thought about Lily writing that note in secret, maybe hiding under her bed, maybe whispering the words so no one would hear. I imagined her folding the paper carefully, licking the envelope. shut with determination, slipping it into the mailbox when Daniel wasn't looking. The courage it must have taken, just to say, "I miss you," made my heart swell with pride and sorrow all at once. She was only 8, but she already understood something it took me 63 years to learn. Truth is, worth the risk. I didn't know if Laura would give her the letter. Maybe she'd throw it away. Maybe she'd read it anyway. But I'd done my part. I'd reached across the silence without begging, without bargaining, without losing myself. And in that act, simple, direct, honest, I'd reclaimed something I thought was lost. My voice as a grandmother. Not the role they'd reduced me to, but the real thing. Steady, watchful, unwavering. For the first time since they left, I didn't feel like I was waiting for permission to exist in Lily's life. I didn't feel like a ghost haunting the edges of their story. I'd planted a seed, just a few words, a few petals, and now it was up to her to water it or not. And that was enough. More than enough. It was freedom. I went to bed early, and for once, I didn't stare at the ceiling rehearsing apologies or plotting defenses. I just closed my eyes and saw Lily's drawing in my mind. The red roof, the yellow door, the purple flowers blooming wild and bright. And I smiled, because no matter what Daniel said, no matter what Laura believed, no matter how far they moved, Lily knew where home was. And so did I. That night, I slept without checking the locks twice, without flinching at every car that passed, because I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was holding space. And that was the beginning of everything real. I signed the final papers at the title office on a Tuesday morning, the air thick with the smell of salt and eucalyptus. The guest house lot, where Laura and Daniel had lived for 3 years while draining my accounts, was officially sold. The check cleared faster than I expected, and by that afternoon, I'd handed over the down payment on a small bungalow 2 blocks from the ocean, tucked between a retired school teacher and a couple who raised rescue dogs. No shared driveway, no guest house, no open door for people who saw kindness as weakness. On moving day, I didn't hire help. I carried my own boxes, Henry's books, my grandmother's china, Lily's drawings taped to construction paper, and planted 3 white camellias along the front walk, just like the ones I'd tended for decades at the old house. My back ached and my knees groaned, but I didn't care. Every shovel of dirt felt like a vow. Never again will I bend so far I disappear. When the last box was inside, I hung Henry's pocket watch in the kitchen window with a red ribbon. It caught the morning light just right, ticking softly like a heartbeat in an empty room that finally felt like mine. The bungalow wasn't fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with chipped formica counters, and a porch that creaked when you stepped on the 3rd board. But it was quiet, real quiet. No muffled arguments from another room. No tense silences at dinner. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the sigh of wind through the palms, and my own breath. Steady and unafraid. That first night, I slept in the living room on an air mattress, wrapped in Henry's old flannel blanket, listening to the distant crash of waves. No checking locks, no flinching at shadows. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to disappoint me. I wasn't bracing for the next excuse, the next emergency, the next betrayal dressed as necessity. I just existed, and it was enough. The next morning, I made coffee in a chipped mug I'd bought at a thrift store and sat on the porch, watching a hummingbird dart between the new camellia blooms. Life wasn't dramatic here. It wasn't loud. It was simple. And that simplicity felt like freedom I hadn't known I needed. I signed up to volunteer at the women's shelter downtown the following week. Not because I wanted to be a hero, but because I remembered what it felt like to sit at a kitchen table wondering how to say no without losing everyone you love. I teach a financial literacy class every Thursday. How to read a bank statement, how to spot red flags in shared accounts, how to protect your assets when someone weaponizes your generosity. Last week, a woman named Marisol stayed after class, eyes red, but steady. "You're not like the others," she said. You don't sound like you're begging for forgiveness for setting a boundary. I just nodded. Boundaries aren't rude, I told her. They're how you stay alive. She hugged me before she left, and I didn't flinch. Teaching isn't about fixing people. It's about showing them they already have what they need, and that includes the right to walk away from thieves who call themselves family. Laura called last Thursday afternoon. I was sorting receipts for my volunteer program when her number flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Mom," she said, her voice raw but calm. "Daniel's gone, for good this time. He packed a bag and left while I was at work. Said he couldn't live under constant suspicion." I didn't laugh. I didn't say, "I told you so." I just listened. She told me about the empty closet, the unpaid bills he left behind, the way Lily cried for 2 days straight. I let her talk. I didn't offer advice. I didn't ask if she'd cut ties. I just waited until her breath evened out, then said, "Take care of Lily." And for the first time in years, I meant it. Not as a desperate plea from a grandmother afraid of losing her granddaughter, but as a clear, clean boundary. It wasn't a request for access. It was a statement of fact. Lily matters. The rest is up to you. She didn't argue. She didn't promise anything. She just whispered, "I will," and hung up. And I believed her, not because she'd changed overnight, but because maybe, just maybe, she'd finally seen the cost of staying. That night, I walked down to the beach with Henry's watch in my pocket. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of coral and lavender, and the tide rolled in slow and steady. I stood at the water's edge, letting the foam lick my sandals, and thought about all the years I spent shrinking myself to fit into other people's lives. I thought about the casserole no one ate, the guest house that became a trap, the tears I swallowed to keep the peace. But I also thought about the camellias pushing through dry soil, the women. In my class taking notes with fierce concentration, Lily's drawing pinned to my fridge. Healing wasn't a grand event. It was this, choosing yourself again and again in small, stubborn ways. It was hanging a watch in a window just because it catches the light. It was saying, "Take care of Lily," without begging for a place in her life. It was planting roots in a house where the only guest was peace. I'm not just a mother or a widow anymore. Those roles still live in me. They always will, but they don't define me. I'm Evelyn, the woman who kept quiet for too long, then found her voice. The woman who loved too hard, then learned to love wisely. The woman who sold the guest house, bought a bungalow, and planted flowers where there used to be only expectation. And as I walked back home, the breeze cool on my face, I realized something simple and true. I'm finally home. Not because of the walls or the address or the ocean nearby, but because I'm no longer running from myself. I'm here, all of me, and that's more than enough. Friends, thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to my story. If it moved you, reminded you of someone you love, or gave you even a little courage, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss what happens next. I'd also love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment and tell me your city or country, because knowing I'm not alone in this means more than you can imagine. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps other women feel seen, heard, and less afraid to speak their truth. You'll find more real, raw stories like this one, right here on this channel, each one carrying the weight of silence finally broken, with love, respect, and gratitude.